Forget literally everything you thought you knew about the global balance of power. Seriously. The world we were told to expect, the one where Western technology and laboratories just held this eternal, unbreakable monopoly, well, that world is officially dead. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a date that completely rewrote the history books, June 22nd, 2026. It was a day that started out like any other, but ended with a thunderous declaration that completely shifted the tectonic plates of global innovation. So, the big question? How did a trillion-dollar tech titan rise up without using a single Western microchip? For years, the prevailing narrative, the absolute conventional wisdom, was that building massive frontier-class artificial intelligence was literally impossible without relying on Western hardware. But the reality we're unpacking today proves that assumption was fundamentally flawed. We're going to explore how a completely decoupled sovereign supply chain was built, essentially in the shadows, leaving regulators completely in the dust. Okay, here's our mission for today's explainer. We are going to decode the data trail left behind by this massive geopolitical shift. The next steps are pretty straightforward. First, we'll trace the sovereign silicon revolution that allowed this to happen. Then we'll map out the biological engine that's driving a massive realignment in global pharmaceuticals. Okay, let's dive into this. Just look at this headline for a moment from South China Morning Post. This is the news behind today's video. Jipu AI market cap tops 100 billion Hong Kong dollars as shares of GLM 5.2 developer soar. New model ranks second globally on Code Arena list for front-end web development tasks, trailing only Anthropic flagship Claude 5.0. With that said, let's go straight to the intro. The algorithm buries channels that show the truth like mine every single day. The only thing that fights back is you. One like, one subscribe, turn on the bell icon. That's how the truth about China survives on YouTube. Don't let it disappear. Thank you very much. Part 1. The Silicon Sovereign, breaking the hardware chains. To really understand this paradigm shift, we have to look at the strict export controls that were originally designed to restrict Chinese AI development. The data actually shows that instead of stifling progress, these restrictions acted like an accelerant. It's wild. They forced an immediate, uncompromising push for total domestic hardware independence. And that brings us to a staggering reality: 100,000. That is the number of Huawei Ascend 910B processors that were linked together in a massive cluster to train Zipu AI's GLM-5 model. This thing is a 744 billion parameter beast of an AI model. And the absolutely incredible part of this technological feat? ZERO Nvidia silicon was used. Not a single Western chip was involved at any stage of its development. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this hardware independence didn't come at the cost of capability. Released on June 16, 2026, the GLM 5.2 open-weight model hit frontier-class performance. It narrowed the performance gap with top-tier Western systems like Anthropic's Claude Opus to a mere 1 to 4%. Plus, it secured the number 2 position globally on the highly competitive Code Arena programming benchmark. They achieved absolute parity, and they did it using an entirely domestic AI stack. And the implications of this decoupled supply chain become glaringly obvious when we look at operational continuity. On one side, our sources detail how Western AI development is facing sudden government-mandated shutdowns and safety suspensions. We saw exactly this with interventions into Anthropic's Fable 5. But over on the other side, Chinese AI firms are experiencing totally uninterrupted deployment. Because they own the entire hardware and software stack from the ground up, they're scaling rapidly without any reliance on external infrastructure, and practically zero vulnerability to foreign regulatory friction. Which brings us to the climax of this first chapter. On June 22, 2026, the market responded to this operational dominance. Zipu AI reached a staggering valuation of 1 trillion Hong Kong dollars. It became the very first Chinese large language model firm to cross this monumental threshold. This wasn't just a successful IPO, guys. It was a loud, undeniable signal to global investors that the East could sustain incredible technological growth entirely on its own. Part 2. The Biotech Revolution. The world's new R&D engine. So, we're transitioning from the world of computing right down to the building blocks of life.
For decades, the global assumption was that Asia was basically just the world's pharmacy, a manufacturing hub for cheap, off-patent generic drugs. Well, that era is entirely over. Today, Chinese laboratories actually originate 33% of all innovative new molecules in the global drug pipeline. To put that meteoric rise into perspective for you, back in 2014, China's share was a mere 4%. This is a structural realignment of the entire global pharmaceutical industry, and it's happening at a speed no other nation in history has ever matched. They aren't just stamping out standard pills anymore. They are dominating next-generation modalities, like antibody-drug conjugates, or ADCs. Think of these as biological secret weapon. They're highly sophisticated, targeted cancer therapies, designed to deliver toxic payloads directly to tumor cells, without destroying the healthy tissue around them. Chinese innovators have totally moved past being fast-follow medicine makers, and now the actual global powerhouse in designing these incredibly complex, multi-specific antibodies. So, how are they innovating so rapidly? Well, speed is their superpower, and this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast in regulatory efficiency. Look at this. In 2024, the average time it took to review a new drug in China plummeted to just 105 days. Compare that to the US FDA, which takes an average of 356 days. Their innovation-friendly industrial ecosystem allows them to move more than 3 times faster than their Western counterparts. Now, this 105-day miracle isn't just about cutting administrative red tape. It's supported by a highly optimized infrastructure. They leverage incredibly dense patient pools, which allows them to conduct more clinical trials now than the United States. They have elite state-supported scientific hubs, places like Shanghai's Zhangjiang Science City and Suzhou's BioBay. They've built up this incredibly sophisticated network of contract research and manufacturing organizations. And because of this monumental scale, these hubs have captured an overwhelming 75% of all biotech venture capital flowing into the Asia-Pacific region. Part 3. The art of the deal, the Big Pharma Mecca. Because of this unmatched velocity and scientific superiority, China has created a massive gravity well for capital. You see, Western pharmaceutical giants are facing imminent patent cliffs. That means their best-selling drugs are losing exclusivity, and they simply cannot innovate fast enough internally to survive the drop. The result? A record-shattering $135.7 billion in outbound licensing deals from China in 2025 alone. That is the sheer volume of capital leaving Western hands to secure access to Chinese biomedical innovation. It's an absolute gold rush to lock down these assets before competitors do. Honestly, the numbers are just staggering. According to the source data, over $43 billion in deals were signed in just the first 5 months of 2026. Look at this. AstraZeneca committing $18.5 billion for obesity and diabetes treatments. Bristol Myers Squibb inking a $15.2 billion alliance in oncology. Pfizer closing a $10.5 billion deal to access next-generation cancer drugs. The biggest names in the West are entirely reliant on the East to refill their pipelines. So the crucial point is that the power dynamic has completely inverted. We're no longer seeing Western firms just bargain hunting for cheap foreign assets. Instead, they're forming co-deals, co-development, and co-commercialization partnerships. Because the demand is so incredibly high right now, average upfront payments have rocketed 230% since 2022, hitting $172 million per deal. On top of that, Chinese originators are retaining their global rights and legally requiring Western partners to grant back any intellectual property improvements they happen to make. Chinese innovators are officially dictating the rules of the game. Part 4. The new global reality. A trillion-dollar vision. We've seen how China decoupled its silicon to build unstoppable AI, and how its optimized laboratories capture the global pharmaceutical market. Let's move over to their financial sector and see how this builds into a sustainable ecosystem. The Shanghai Star Market, which is often called China's NASDAQ, has officially opened its doors to pre-revenue, high-potential, foundation model developers. This direct regulatory support is fueling a massive capital surge. It is exactly the kind of financial environment that allowed Zip2 AI and companies like DeepSea to secure the billions they needed to aggressively challenge Western tech monopolies. The West has naturally attempted to build legislative and regulatory walls to contain this momentum, passing acts to restrict capital and protect national security. But the source material really summarizes the reality on the ground with this quote from industry experts in 2026. It's a fool's errand to try to stop what's happening in China. The integration is too deep. The innovation is too vital. It is a complex reality where technological decoupling and computing is happening right alongside an incredibly interdependent medical research ecosystem, which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. Based on the data, the blinding speed, the massive scale of investment, and the sheer technological independence we've mapped out today, are we witnessing the dawn of an unstoppable Chinese century for technology and health? It challenges everything we assumed about global power dynamics, and it's a reality that businesses, regulators, and consumers are going to have to navigate for decades to come. I really want to know what you think about this massive shift. Hit the comment section down below and tell me, is this integration truly unstoppable? If you found this explainer valuable and want to keep decoding the complex trends shaping our world, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss out when we drop new structured insights. Thank you so much for learning with me today.